And we continue our broadcast on freedom. Greetings to everyone who is with us. Katerina Vishnevska is here in the studio for you. And next, let's talk about the following. Israel wants to cooperate with Ukraine in intercepting Iranian drones. The country's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has already sent a request to hold a conversation with President Volodymyr Zelensky to discuss this issue. This request is connected to Ukraine's extensive experience and the intention to establish cooperation in this area. Our report covers how Ukrainians are helping to strengthen security not only in Europe, but now also in the Middle East.
Ukrainian air defense systems are reaching a new level. During the massive attack on Ukraine on the night of March 14th, the armed forces shot down about 500 aerial threats. Among them, all cruise missiles were destroyed. And that rarely happens, reported Yuri Akhnat, head of the communications department of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. According to him, there were missiles that attacked along a ballistic trajectory, such as the Iskander-M or S-400, as well as 2 Zircon anti-ship missiles. In addition, the aggressor used 430 attack UAVs. Ignat said that the drone interceptor crews achieved good results.
A significant portion of the attack drones were intercepted precisely by this innovative method. I wouldn't say it's still innovative because now the whole world is interested in this method of intercepting attack UAVs.
To repel attacks in the Middle East, the United States deployed 10,000 Merabs interceptor unmanned aerial vehicles. These drones were tested in Ukraine. The armed forces of Ukraine used them to repel massive Russian strikes involving Iranian drones. Shahed. 3 Ukrainian groups with such valuable practical experience have gone to the Middle East to provide assistance. Experts, military personnel, and engineers have gone, reports Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Today, they are already at work.
Ukrainian interceptor drones are becoming a key factor in stability in the Middle East, just as they once did. Western air defense and missile defense systems like Patriot and F-16 fighter jets became a stabilizing factor for us in the war against Russia. Andriy Korvalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine.
Since interceptor drones developed by Ukraine are popular among partner states, especially in Middle Eastern countries, the world's largest oil exporter, Saudi Aramco from Saudi Arabia, is in talks with 2 Ukrainian companies. The Wall Street Journal writes that these drones are being purchased to protect oil fields from attacks by Iranian Shaheds. The publication reports that Saudi officials are also discussing with a Ukrainian company the possibility of acquiring electronic warfare systems designed to jam UAV communications.
How were the first Shaheds launched? We know how the first Shaheds were launched. There were no Russian operators. There were operators from another country, the one from which the Shaheds came, because they needed to be trained. And they trained them under real wartime conditions. So, when it comes to whether we will open a front, the Iranians have long been allies of Russia, both on paper and in real actions. That's what I told you about.
The president of Ukraine is calling on European countries to develop the production of air defense missiles, especially those capable of shooting down ballistic targets. He emphasizes that Russia will try to use the war in the Middle East in order to cause even greater destruction, both in Ukraine and in Europe. Ukraine is already beginning to prepare for the next winter and is signing strategically important agreements with its partners. For example, several partnership agreements have already been signed in Bucharest between countries, including one on the joint production of strike drones in Romania using Ukrainian expertise.
Today we signed a declaration on strategic partnership, which is an important milestone in our bilateral relations. We should not hide or avoid speaking frankly about the fact that historically there was a certain mistrust between our countries. But this mistrust was eliminated the moment the war began, in 2022. And today is the moment when our 2 countries will mutually trust each other in what they will do going forward. They pledge to act together for the sake of this part of Europe.
The roles have changed. Now Ukraine will be training European troops. Last month, Berlin and Kyiv agreed that Ukraine would send military instructors to German army academies to teach the skills they have acquired during their fight against Russian aggression. According to the commander of the German army, Ukrainian military instructors will help ensure readiness to repel any Russian attack on NATO by 2029.
We don't have time. The enemy isn't waiting for us to declare our readiness. That's why we must use every opportunity to prepare. We have high hopes. Ukrainian soldiers are currently the only ones in the world with frontline combat experience against Russia. The fact that they are now coming to us as instructors, it reflects an equal partnership in the field of security. Christian Freuding, commander of the German army, Lieutenant General.
The experience that Ukraine has gained in the context of full-scale war is gradually becoming part of the global security system, from intercepting missile drones to developing new air defense technologies. Ukrainian solutions are now being used not only at the front, but also help protect partners in different regions. Ukrainian technologies, military experience, and specialists have become an important element of global security.
And for more details on how Ukraine is sharing its combat experience, we will talk with our guest, Valery Yakovenko, head of the Drone.ua group of companies and expert in unmanned technologies and robotics. Valery is joining us. Glory to Ukraine and welcome to freedom.
Glory to the heroes, greetings to you.
You know, I was remembering the beginning of the full-scale invasion when dozens of missiles were flying toward Ukraine. Sometimes even hundreds of missiles in a single attack. In the very first weeks, Ukrainians were asking NATO to close the skies and were referring to Israel's experience, including the Iron Dome. We were interested. But now we absolutely understand that, first of all, these are somewhat different technologies, and what works well for Israel may not necessarily work well for Ukraine. Nevertheless, over these 4 years, you know, a monster has grown up. In fact, those Shaheds that the Russian Federation used to attack Ukraine underwent a certain modernization. As I understand it, the fruits of this modernization are now being reaped in the Middle East. Overall, yes. To what extent is what we are witnessing now actually a consequence of Russia's war against Ukraine? And to what extent could the experience of Ukrainian air defenders now be in demand and useful here?
What has happened over the past 4 years has in fact shaped a new strategy, a new approach, a new strategy for conducting military operations, a new strategy for carrying out terrorist attacks. And the way Ukraine was able to build its air defense system, the ecosystem that Ukraine has created, in order to detect, track, and destroy any enemy targets, this is the experience that collectively shapes a new product to be used for protecting the skies. And the technologies that have been available in the West before, they are effective, they work, but economically they are absolutely inefficient. You can't shoot down various terrorist devices with missiles that cost hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. For this, you need to use the Ukrainian approach, which is scalable and can be applied in any potential escalations, in any quantity. And it is precisely this experience that is interesting in terms of how it can be shared. In addition, there is also the issue of localization, because today Ukrainian equipment is made from Ukrainian components, and there are localized production and supply chains for all components which do not depend on any imported parts.
Well, looking at the broader picture, you know, there is a great deal of ongoing discussion and debate happening right now, suggesting that Ukraine's unique experience, to a certain extent, could provide valuable insights to help us navigate and eventually solve our current situation. Do you think we can somehow find a way to convert the significant technological advancements and strategic breakthroughs we've achieved over the extensive period of our work in effectively detecting, tracking, and neutralizing, among other things, strike drones now? Somehow convert military aid to Ukraine into political support?
Previously, any attempt to export Ukrainian technologies was perceived quite negatively, since it was competition with Western weapon systems. The fact that Ukraine produced and continues to produce drones, robotic systems, and various components, all of this, in one way or another, was manufactured on the territory of Western countries. Yet, at the same time, Ukrainian equipment was sometimes dozens of times cheaper. And this did not have a positive effect on political opportunities. Today, however, we are at a stage where Western countries realize that they have the equipment, but they cannot use it, because firstly, it is not adapted to the new conditions. Secondly, there is very little of it, catastrophically little. And thirdly, even if they ramp up production, there simply isn't enough time to do it. Every day, every week, every month of delays in making difficult and frank decisions means potential lives lost. The tragic and avoidable losses of human life as a direct result of terrorist attacks that are being carried out across the Middle East. Therefore, cooperation with Ukraine in a completely new and innovative format is no longer a contentious or debated issue. On the contrary, it is now a critical matter that allows us to gain additional political points in terms of complex international negotiation processes and diplomatic discussions. because we are providing our assistance in return. We are asking to strengthen support for Ukraine in those areas where we still need it.
Valerie, how vulnerable are various targets to modern strike drones in general? Whatever the case, from our own experience in Ukraine, we know that, for example, the Russian Federation, with those same Shaheds and Garans, they attack residential buildings, hospitals, anything at all. No matter what kind of target it is, how vulnerable is it without the use of specific countermeasures? As of today?
If you don't use the technologies developed in Ukraine, no matter what kind of defense system is invented in the West, it will simply be overwhelmed after just a few weeks of operation. They'll run out of ammunition. There will simply be nothing left to shoot down this or that terrorist equipment. The Ukrainian experience is the only one applicable in this case, and it allows for the protection of absolutely all infrastructure to a fairly high percentage. We're not talking about 100% interception. That never happens. It's impossible. But when we talk about countermeasures, the highest quality indicators do exist with Ukrainian equipment. Plus, let's not forget about the constant adaptation of equipment because it changes, technical operating conditions change, countermeasure systems change, and so does enemy terrorist equipment. Over the years of war, it has learned to operate under electronic warfare conditions, and these electronic warfare systems simply do not exist in the countries that are currently under attack. Therefore, when we talk about Ukrainian technologies, it's not just about drones that can shoot down aerial targets. It's also about detection systems, systems for identifying aerial escorts. It's about electronic warfare systems, drone systems, and other types of defenses designed to shoot down aerial targets. Taken together, this is what works.
Also, not a single drone flies without a UAV operator in Ukraine. We know how important this profession is right now, both on the front lines, at the front and in the rear. Although Ukraine now essentially, there is one big front and attacks come to all regions. Specialists. We observed a lot, first because of that discussion, and then in practice when Ukrainian pilots were being trained on F-16S and other aircraft to learn how to use them, work effectively, and repel air attacks. UAV operators. That is, well, it's clear that some technologies can be, you can hand over some conditionally pre-assembled modules. But who is going to operate all of this? To what extent, let's say, there are already specialists, so can someone be retrained or do they need to be taught from scratch? In general, essentially, we're dealing with a new military specialty.
Absolutely right. This new military specialty was invented in Ukraine. It exists, it has been scaled up, and there is an entire infrastructure for training personnel in this field. And this is exactly what the West is lacking. The West is not ready not only to use the equipment that Ukraine could potentially provide, the West is not even ready to train its own operators in the numbers that are necessary. Anyone can be taught to operate drones with varying degrees of success. It just takes time, but it's important to note that all the knowledge is acquired from scratch. Existing drone operators can help with the new equipment, but only in very small numbers. This equipment is of an entirely new type, a new level. And here, it's not just a matter of people. It's also about the readiness to use the same digital systems that Ukraine uses in order to reduce the pressure on operators when it comes to managing the aerial fleet. That's why this is a comprehensive solution, and the West has nothing to offer in this regard. And in this case, Ukraine is truly providing assistance that can be transferred and used to repel terrorist attacks.
Valery, there really is a lot going on here right now. This gives rise to some interesting points. Thank you very much for joining us, not only interesting but also important points. And for your explanations, you are always welcome on Freedom. The topic of drones is indeed very relevant right now. Valery Kovenko, head of the Drone.ua group of companies, an expert in unmanned technologies and robotics. Let me remind you, he joined us today.